This leads us naturally, all right, to skills development and to training. And I see it as a way to get the teams, the organizations on board, okay? Instead of rah-rah and showing beautiful slides, how wonderful our life is going to be once we implement this, right? Getting people to know what AI is, how it will change their job, and getting that knowledge to me is fundamental. So how do you find organizations really getting more votes in, internal support for what's
Yeah.
coming?
Yeah. So there's a couple great points you raised there. So number one is how do you do skills development across the organization? So I'm a big believer that execution solves most problems. And so generally what I recommend to an organization is say, all right, you've got your core architecture, share that, train people on it so they understand like how you do it, how you want to see most applications delivered, and then set some guardrails on what is the acceptable level of like risk and exposure. So grade your AI applications. So grade 1, kind of isolated. Grade 2 might make some like marketing content. Grade 3 might be making like decisions on supply chain. Grade 4 might be, potentially adjusting pricing and have fiscal responsibilities. Grade 5 might have potential to harm people, right? And so what you say is like, okay, everyone in the organization can experiment with grade 1 and grade 2 applications. Here's our standard architecture. If you see a problem like it, see if you can solve it. And then provide the training and resources to do that type of grade 1, grade 2 application. So you've put guardrails in the organization, you've put knowledge, and you build a repeatable architecture. And that I find, like the people that want to learn it will learn it, and they'll deliver cool stuff, and other people will learn from them. And so the people that are like kind of following will learn from those people, and that genuinely seems to be the most successful way to drive to up level an organization. And the second thing I would do for change management is encourage a standardized way of once a quarter or once every 2 months, whatever the cadence is, of bringing a group of stakeholders together to revisit, your roadmap. And then potentially looking at some of those problems, and as people show up in the organization as developing those skills, allocate them a project, but also allocate them like a business partner. And so what you're constantly doing is you're evaluating the roadmap, you're developing skills on the technical side by giving those guardrails, and maybe you give them a grade 3 application or a grade 4 application over time, and you begin to use your own policies, your standard platform, and your roadmap as well, bring it together. And on the business side, what you're doing is you're maintaining effectively a dashboard again of that roadmap, but alternatively, like, hey, it's been in production for this long. Here's the feedback. Here's the impact we're seeing. Here's the next set of updates we're taking. And that stitches all the technology into the business side. And that's where the business sees the change, right? The business they don't know what models we use. They don't really care. But if they can see consistent progress against a business outcome, if they can see that growth over time, then that's really powerful. And so that's generally like a system for change management that I like to use. Obviously there's communication and updates and newsletters or what have you, but those practical elements put together allow you to drive the capability of your organization, drive a common rubric for prioritization, and still maintain continuity with the business. And so that's generally how I would recommend organizations think about their like cultural and sort of skills change management.
Sure. And you know what? Business loves performance management. Okay. There are people, there are teams who are really equipped with tools. They're really equipped with all the reporting capabilities, with all the analytics. And guess what? Sometimes these are just numbers. Everybody says we're data driven, right? So how can you demonstrate your first inside success, right? With your first projects that gone right? Okay, what part performance management can play without overbearing those doers, and micromanaging and measuring every single step, which again, right, we know it's just demotivating. So
yeah, you might have noticed in that framework I had, there's no real overhead in that, right? That was designed so that the engineers could build things, the leaders could prioritize things, and the business could assess things. And so I totally agree with you. Like, genuinely, I've been on the other side of the equation, so I genuinely resist it now. Or I want to create like a mathematically correct way of assessing the business without creating like overhead for organizations. And the way to do that is be principle driven versus rule driven. And so I don't know if you've noticed as I went through, most of my guidance are principles that come together to give you a system versus systems themselves to give you an outcome. And that allows organizations to move faster, but it allows you to also adjust a principle and reset the organization. If you say, hey, level 3 apps are now including this capability, level 5 apps are now including this capability, and the organization can self-rationalize. Where if you use rules driven, then you have to be like, okay, everyone, we have to re-go through our rules, let's sit down for training, update the rules. You have to, like, I genuinely believe that people are able to rationalize outcomes, 80% of the time, and people are probably able to like rationalize rules 80% of the time, but the cost of delivering rules versus principles is higher. And so statistically, a principle-based organization model is better for the organization over time, but it does require some additional thought.
I know what you mean. It requires mind change, okay? Because what we're saying, principle-based organization, this gives you freedom and authority and responsibility, okay? And when you feel that foot in the game, I guess, right? People from single employee to team leaders to right to large departments, you have more stake in the game. I mean, I'm all for individual contribution. What do you think? Just feeling connected to larger goals.
100%. And then also, even right down to like the individual, like giving them the tools to self-innovate and self-learn is really powerful. And it creates, didn't mean to say it this way, but it creates creativity, develops that sort of creative spirit, it creates internal entrepreneurs. And, like I've worked in regulated industries and, there's still rules, like you still have to think about privacy and HIPAA and what have you. But the actual development of the applications and the thinking and the applied AI doesn't have to start with that. It just has to include that. And so there are ways of, saying here's grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, here's the tools for that. And it really does allow the organization to really evolve and grow.